companies are so dynamic. Like they're constantly changing which frontline tools they're using, new roadmap tools, new project tools, new tools for this, new tools for that. They're constantly shifting data around. There's constantly reorging. New leaders are coming in and out every few years. And so what we found was it's very dynamic in terms of like how that all works. And the way the products that are built for, enterprise portfolio management, strategic portfolio management, program management, PMOs, offices of strategy, the way those tools work, if you're static and you spend a lot of money and time wiring them up, they can work for you for a time. But when something changes, it almost feels like a re-implementation or a re-rollout is required. And what people usually do is they just say, hey, we're going to give up and just go back to docs and spreadsheets because it's not worth it. It's too expensive. It's too fragile.
Leading and scaling a business isn't hard because you lack ideas. It's hard because your time, your team's time, and your focus get eaten alive by the daily grind. Too many leaders are overwhelmed, under pressure, and bogged down by low-leverage tasks. I've learned this the hard way, scaling Nobody Studios, advising fast-growing startups and Fortune 500s, all while leading multiple ventures at once. I've seen firsthand how even the best executives get buried in meetings, lose strategic visibility, and burn out just trying to keep up. That's why I built the AI Executive Coaching Program, the same frameworks and tools that I've used in my own work to make it more meaningful, better leveraged, and more impactful. We're helping leaders in global businesses get hours back every week, turning chaos into clarity and operating with more leverage than ever before. This isn't theory. This is about identifying the traits you need to unlearn, the tasks pivotal to your success, and the tools that can be built into workflows to optimize your capabilities every day. From transforming meeting scripts into transcripts, into action plans, and spotting performance patterns you can't see on your own, we're upgrading the way executives lead. If you want to scale without losing your edge, let's talk. You'd be surprised how quickly you can lead at a whole new level.
Enjoying the podcast? Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube. This way, you won't miss any episode, and it greatly supports our podcast.
My mom put a computer in my hands before it was in vogue. And so I was around computers early and wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my career. And the advice I was getting was, technology is a good way to go. I was also getting advice. You never put yourself in a bad situation getting a business degree. And so not knowing what I wanted to do, I did computer science and then I got a master's in business, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was dropping resumes at a job fair and met a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and we really hit it off. And I joined the firm, and I was like, "Wow, this is a really dynamic place." They were putting me in front of big companies, way out of my element. So I'm out there trying to help these big companies, make decisions, and I barely know what I'm doing as someone, in their 20s. So I really fell in love with that, and so only job I'd ever had that was like a professional job. So I'm like, well, this is the way. I'll just become a partner and stay at one of these firms for the rest of my career. And as we got going, I kept being pulled back to software. In the firm, I would build software and we would sell it. And so we're like running these little mini software experiments in the firm, and one of them got hot and took off. At one point I had the choice, the partners gave me, basically the choice was you can stay here and make partner eventually, or you can go with the software because they were basically selling it. And because, the firms aren't really great at building out software and maintaining software.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so that turning point there was a really important one where I decided I'm going to go do the startup, because I got close enough to it. I was like, there's something really cool about building something new and taking on that kind of dynamic challenge. It was a hard choice at the time, but man, that was a really important decision that I feel very lucky that it worked out the way it did. And that was a big turning point for me though. So, and I've been doing startups ever since then.
One of the things that resonates massively is even you thinking about where to invest your first 4 years really of sort of directed education and learning is kind of interesting. Similar to you, when I went to university, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And I was trying to find courses that gave me this exposure to business, because I knew I liked the idea of business and building things and what that was about. but I had this strong sense technology was going to have a huge impact on the future. And I was trying to find these courses, and a bit like you, I was lucky that I went to Dublin Technology University, and they started this program that was sort of half business and half software engineering. And believe me, I hated the software engineering at the beginning. I was like, God, I suck at this. But it was one of these things that gave me a very interesting sort of breadth of exposure. So when I started to go into the workforce, like my first startup, I was an engineer, but it got me really thinking about like the power of business and technology. And, you know, you've obviously brought that into PwC, and then you brought it into the startup, right? And all the way through. And I know you're a deep technologist, and I know how much you love tech. But talk a little bit about how understanding a little bit of both of those worlds has maybe helped you, you know, as you continue to go forward, right? So you stayed in this startup, you know, it started to show promise. Talk a little bit about when you were in that sort of first time in, you know, as a founding team member, bringing this thing to life. Like what were some of the things that were going through your mind, and just the experiences that you were gathering from being part of that?
Yeah, just in terms of like the business and the tech side coming together, it's like I was saying, you know, like at this point it'd be awesome to tell you like, oh, I could clearly see when I was coming, you know, into college that this was the future, and that I should go get experience at a big firm consulting with customers to get close to the pain, and then go build software in these fast dynamic, you know. It would sound cool, but that's, you know, honestly, some of it was luck, but it is a really powerful combination. You know, when I started doing the CTO roles, just because I'd consulted with customers and been close to the problems that they faced in trying to, you know, make better decisions and be compliant and avoid risk and all the things we were working on, that's a super helpful aspect of doing a startup. It gives you a lot of empathy. It gives you a lot of understanding about why these problems are much harder than they sound. It seems, you know, a lot of these problems that we're out to solve on the surface sound pretty easy, and when you really dig into them, they're super complex and rich, and there's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts. And so all that coming together, and then getting to go build tech after that, was a really good sequence of events for me. And then once I got into startups, I was just a sponge. So I knew pretty early that I wanted to go start one eventually. But, you know, honestly, it's another area where I don't know if looking back, if this was a good thing or a bad thing, but I was nervous to just go start one myself. And so I wanted to join executive teams and be, you know, at the board level, you know, at the investment level, learning as much as I could. And so I ended up doing several startups. And so I was in my 40s before I actually started my first one as like the first person in. But yeah, lots of, I guess that's probably the more cautious approach to it. But it worked out. You know, if you're going in to learn, a startup's a great place to go. And usually, if you raise your hand and you really want to help solve problems, they'll give you more than you can handle pretty quick.
Well, I love what you're saying, because again, it resonates massively. You know, so much of the sort of Silicon Valley narrative is, you know, you're a kid playing with a computer, you go to college, but that's a waste of time. What are you doing there? You dump it, and yeah, you know, you go for a jog and trip over a stone, and you launch Facebook on a weekend, you know, like, and for me, like, that's such a false narrative about how great companies and the experience most people have is about, right? There's all the data talks to the best founders are actually often later in their career, well into their 30s, early 40s, when they build these companies, because you've built up this experience, right? You've cut your fingers, you've made your mistakes, you've learned all the aspects. Again, as you're even just touching on here about building a great company, it's not just building a great product or being technically smart. You got to understand how to raise money. You've got to understand how to manage investors. You've got to understand how to meet customers, build partnerships, hire teams. As you say, like there's no other job like it in the world, in my belief anyway, because entrepreneurship, I believe, is just a learning experience. You're constantly being put in places that are uncomfortable, that you know often very little about. And the systems, certainly what I was learning, you know, my first startup was great. First year we rocketed, we built a product, launched it, people loved it. But the second year we had no idea how to scale a business, and we blew it up. And it was, you know, I spent 6 months wandering around South America afterwards, asking myself all these questions like, why did it go wrong? I thought we had the right team. It felt like we were on the right path. And again, like later at the time, it cut like a knife. But in retrospect now, it's one of those things that has really helped me. This is part of the journey, right? It's like that's sort of the, I don't know, the apprenticeship, if you want to think of it, that was part of learning how to become an entrepreneur, you know. And again, someone like you who, again, you invested this time, you put yourself in these rooms to learn from these folks, to be ready to sort of take the bold step, if you will, and I'm going to start this thing, right? So that sort of takes us interestingly to sort of AgileCraft, probably where we met, right? You'd built this fantastic product, big competitor in the work management space, challenging people like Jira, who were sort of probably the, you know, leading product in the market at that point. Talk to us a little bit then about you as an entrepreneur then. Like, it's your first time in the CEO role. Previously, you had done the CTO role in the startups you've been involved in. What were some of the things you had to unlearn to lead that company? But also, now you're building this product, this work management product. You're trying to take down like a huge market with some very well-funded, well-staffed and resourced competitors. And you're a team of like 15 folks in outside of Austin. So talk to us a little bit about some of the lessons along the way there, or things you had to unlearn.
Yeah, I was thinking. I knew you were going to ask me about things I've had to unlearn, and like, you know, with being a technologist, you know, it's kind of, if you're not good at unlearning, you're in trouble, because it's a moving target at all times. But one thing I was thinking about that's kind of interesting as an entrepreneur that I've struggled with, that's a tough thing for me. And it's one of these things where I know exactly what it is, and it's still hard for me to like rewire each time. But I've been in 6 startups, so I've been acquired 5 times. And that going from like running as fast as you can towards solving a problem where everybody in the company is aligned towards that one problem. And we're so customer focused, and we're just very determined to go solve this thing. And then you get acquired, and usually then you become one of many things in the portfolio. You become this one little part. Your feature flow almost stops, which is just heartbreaking. But you have a job to do. You need to go lead inside that company and do the best you can for your people and for your customers, and in good faith for the company that acquired you, right? So that is a very hard transition to go from that, and then you move into not even being able to see the full strategic picture in these companies. Usually you're one of the legs of the stool when you get acquired, and so that's a tough one for me. And I feel like I'm getting better and better at it because I've done it a few times. But that mind shift and like change, it's basically changing how you're going from being this type of executive to this type of executive overnight. And then when you go do the startup again, you got to shift back into that mode of doing really big things with little resources.
I love what you're sharing, because this is sort of, until you go through that experience, like nobody can really understand it, right? Or as you say, if you've been leading a company and now suddenly you've got someone you're actually reporting to, it's such a transition, right? Of sort of experiencing it, Like it was funny when when I started working in Nobody Studios, our venture studio, like for the best part of 8 years, I've been working for myself, making every decision I want, living with the decisions I'm making as well. Like that's part of it. But then when we went into the studio, I wasn't the CEO. There was another person who's the CEO. So my role is again, to do the things to help the CEO because they have to make those calls. And man, I swear to God, I bet you for 6 months, I used to sit there and like get so angry going, hang on, why am I feeling so frustrated here? And yet, to make a team, somebody has to make those decisions, right? But again, you're used to having so much context, and then it shrinks, and then it's missing. But it did remind me, like what I want in a great company and a great set of support around it to make these sort of great decisions that I want to make, right? And it sort of is a unique thing that you have done, as you said, numerous times. So as you were building these products, and then transitioning in and out, you've been working in a space that has been, for me, super fascinating. It's work management. it's people understanding, what success is, how to stay aligned. You wrote this fantastic book recently that I want everybody to go and get a copy of called The Decisive Company. And I love the title for a number of reasons. One, I just think it's what great teams do. They're decisive. It also reminds me of a great podcast when Jeff Bezos did recently, where he was talking about what makes or what he wants his companies to be. And decisive is this word that he also landed on. And I think it's a great word. So talk to us a little bit then about, as you were building the AgileCraft, turning it into Jira Align as Atlassian acquired it, and then getting to this place now, again, even with Dotwork, where you're like, I want to help people be decisive in how they make decisions. And, you've built multiple companies in this space around work management. So what are some of the things you again, had to unlearn as you go through this understanding of how people want to make decisions, but how technology is really radically changing, how this can be done now?
This problem particularly has kind of been, a life quest for me. And, I don't know if I just gravitate towards the really ugly problems, but most of the startups I've done have been like untangling like really tricky things. And this one, I've definitely had to learn and unlearn some things that I thought I knew about the problem itself. So, and really what the problem all comes down to, it's like I was telling you before, it's one of these things that kind of sounds like a simple thing. And when you really try to do it in practice, it's very hard. And so, when I think about the landscape out there for making decisions, we've got a lot of software and a lot of platforms for different parts of the business, for supply chain, for CRM, for project management. Like there are established platforms out there that are in use and they do the job. The part of the problem that I've always been interested in is, well, what about when it comes time to do the strategic thing, where we need to decide, should we do more of this or less of this, or see what's working, or move resources from here to there, or make a hard decision. All of those types of things, it's not one platform. That really requires bringing together a lot of knowledge and understanding of how the business works, kind of the operating model of how things work, the status of things, the intent of things, right? All the pieces that make all that work live in a lot of systems. And I think the reason no one's built a dominant platform for that is because it's such a tricky data collaboration, even psychological problem, right? There's a lot going on there. When you think about how data gets presented up to execs and then how that data flows back down through the organization to help everybody understand why, there's a lot going on there. It's really the lifeblood of how organizations do the most important thing, which is strategically decide what they're going to go do, execute on it, measure the outcomes, and then recalibrate, right? And those learning loops have been something I've been really passionate about, because I feel like if we could close those loops, you and I used to talk about and evangelize value engineering, right? How do we engineer more value into the process? And the answer is you have to have closed loops where you're measuring what's working, what's not. In practice, in a large, complicated company with lots of teams and products and processes and levels of maturity and ways of working, all those things, it's really hard to connect those dots. And so, like you mentioned, I've been working on this one for a while, this problem space. And I think initially what we believed was, if we can get all of the data in one, moved over to one place, and then we could get everybody working the same way, kind of a top down where everybody agrees this is how we're going to do things. Like, here's how we're going to annual plan or quarterly plan. Here's how we're going to prioritize. Here's how our ceremonies are going to work. Then this software will connect the company and everything will be great. And the naive part about that is, what we learned and that we had to unlearn from that approach was, companies are so dynamic. Like, they're constantly changing which frontline tools they're using, new roadmap tools, new project tools, new tools for this, new tools for that. They're constantly shifting data around. There's constantly reorging. New leaders are coming in and out every few years. And so what we found was it's very dynamic in terms of like how that all works. And the way the products that are built for, enterprise portfolio management, strategic portfolio management, program management, PMOs, offices of strategy, the way those tools work, if you're static and you spend a lot of money and time wiring them up, they can work for you for a time. But when something changes, it almost feels like a re-implementation or a re-rollout is required. And what people usually do is they just say, hey, we're going to give up and just go back to docs and spreadsheets because it's not worth it. It's too expensive. It's too fragile. And so really fascinating problem to work on. So we had pockets of success, and I would say it was the companies that were more disciplined and a little more static got further. And so when we looked at doing this new one, we're like, well, what's changed? What have we learned? So we identified those things that have changed about our understanding of the problem. And the market's changed quite a bit. Like the need to move fast and learn fast has never been more evident.
Paramount. Yeah. It's only accelerating. It feels like, right?
Yeah, and we don't even have to talk about an agile mindset. You just have to talk to an executive team about AI and what it's doing to their company, and they get it, right? Yeah. They're like, we got to figure this out. Whatever it is, we got to figure it out and be able to adapt to it. And so what was so cool, and this is another thing, like this was probably more of a thing we had to unlearn from a product approach, but when we looked at it, I was like, there are so many new tools available to us that just weren't mainstream when we built the first product. Knowledge graphs have come a long way. Agentic frameworks have come a long way. And so when we really looked at it, we're like, wow, there's some really interesting technology that's more geared towards a problem of connecting dots and being relationship focused and building a flexible ontology. And so we're like, hey, why don't we just build a product right on top of an ontology that sits on a knowledge graph and then put an agentic framework under it? And again, this is one of those things where it's kind of like my career where I'm like, oh yeah, I planned all that, Barry. It definitely wasn't like that. So like some of these problems were like, early on, we're like, well, we still have this problem that we always faced where we have all this really rich insights that could help the team make better decisions. But how do we take that data to them in the moment, at the right moment, where we can give it to them where they sit, because they're not going to go fishing for it. And so how can we bring data to the right person in context right when they need that data? And we really didn't have an answer for that last problem. And we were founded in October, and ChatGPT went mainstream in November of that year. A few years ago, and we're like, oh wow, there's something here. And so we tracked that closely, and we're able to just build the whole thing on an agentic framework for all of the workflow and bringing, and getting context from the graph. And so lots of things we've had to unlearn about how we understood the problem, how we solved the problem, the technology we brought to bear to solve the problem. So this one's been a ball just from
Yeah, no, it's inspiring stuff to listen to you. I think that, like timing in startups is such a, it's an unquantifiable in many ways, right? And what was always fascinating, watching you as a team build AgileCraft to this point where you built an amazing product that helped people when they had structure that they could just really fly, and then it would give structure to teams that were sort of struggling with it. And at the time with the technology, it was a great product to achieve that and solve this portfolio planning challenge that many people have. But I love that you're describing the reality that work is not perfect, that it's messy, that it evolves, that people come in, people come out, folks want different tools. They want and to be able to innovate right in front of them. But the challenge with that is then you have this disparate sort of information all over the company, and the cost of centralizing it and cleaning it and making it useful, again, even 2 years ago, was just so high that people would end up with their annual planning in a Google Doc to a certain extent. But then Here we are, and you're in this place where these technologies they're still maturing, but you are building to where I feel like the puck is sort of going to at this point. And you've managed to create this amazing product that is able to bring all this organizational knowledge together in a place. And then suddenly it doesn't matter what systems people are using to a certain point, they can get this real living context of what the company is doing, this organizational memory, as you describe it, which I think is just a fabulous word. And even just thinking about the kind of ways people can ask questions of it, how you can present it to them, how it can adapt to sort of a changing world, to me is sort of like one of these massive innovations that probably most folks don't understand the power of this until they start playing around with it. So talk to us a little bit about you're on the front line here and figuring this stuff out. There's a raft of people that are hearing these words like agentic AI and generative AI and knowledge graphs, and they're sitting there going, they're overwhelmed. Execs I speak to are overwhelmed because they feel they need to know, but they don't know. And next week there's 5 more tools that come on the market, and they're like, well, what one's that better for? Is it better for combing my hair or brushing my teeth, or what do I use it for? As someone who's leading, again, the sort of the wave here and building a product in this place, what do you think the industry needs to unlearn that maybe you have experienced as a team about suddenly having these technical capabilities that have changed the way the problem can be solved? Like, the problem exists, and you know it as good as anybody about managing work and alignment and clarity. But now these technologies is mean the way it can be solved is radically changing. So help us understand, what you've seen from going through that sort of experience.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd like to say we have that one solved, but that's a tough one for us. So it's of some of the things you mentioned, like there's transformation fatigue, right? Most of these organizations have gone through many large transformations over the last 20 years. Agile transformations, digital transformations. Everybody says they're agentic. Everybody says they connect the dots and help you make decisions. Honestly, at the end of the day, that's what these products are saying they help you do. And so in the environment where companies have already tried a few things to solve this problem, and a lot of them, like I said, have reverted back to docs and spreadsheets and pages, it is pretty tough to break through on the messaging. And when, one of the things we, as technologists, one of the ways we try to describe how we're different, we end up talking about the technology and less about how we're different at solving the problem. And it's one of those things, I'm more and more convinced. What's cool about what we've built and the way we've built it is, I'm almost to a point where you may not like this answer, but it's so hard to describe the problem. I'll give you another example. John Cutler, who's on our team, our head of product, he kind of talks about these problems as forever problems. And he's right. Like, you'll never completely solve company alignment, right? You just want to be better at it. Like, if we could be 10% better at alignment, how much would that save us or net us? It's a huge number, but you're never going to be 100% aligned, right? Right on. Yeah, and so even describing the problem we solve, it's like, look, we don't solve the problem completely. We just make it much better, much more efficient. Hopefully move you in the right direction with what we're solving for. What's cool about the way we've structured this one is we kind of learned the first time, like, we need to be able to go into an organization and go from a conversation with someone about what they're trying to do and how they're trying to run their organization and where it's falling down, to showing them how their organization looks in the software with data that feels very much like like their data, their world. And we can do a lot of that with AI in a day or in 2 days. And that's really the thing that's working for us, is going from like conversation to working software, and even reaching out and grabbing data from your environment, because we're taking a different approach to that as well, where we can go get just the pieces of the data we need to solve the problem versus trying to do like massive moving all the data so that it all sits in our system. I'm kind of in the space, or in the mind space right now, of like, let's show more than we tell. But admittedly, part of that is because I can't figure out the T-shirt slogan to explain what we do and why we're different. So, I know I'm supposed to figure it out, but it's really tough for this problem at this particular time.
Well, I always think when you're at the beginning of something, there's no analogies for some of the things we're doing at the moment, right? Like, this really is a new place where people are learning, and I think, to your point, I think that's why showing rather than talking is actually the most powerful, because people get a real tacit experience of it. There's 2 things you said that really resonated. So one of the things I've been doing the last 6 months is coaching execs how to use AI for productivity in their day-to-day life, right? I did a survey. I have a mailing list of about 5,000 execs on it. And I surveyed them all to say, how are you learning AI? What are you doing with it? And 6% said they were at a beginner stage. 63 were like, they're just learning how to do this stuff, right? One of the things that was most interesting firstly, until people started to sit down and use or interact with an LLM, whether it's GBT, Claude, whatever, and showing them, like doing a small action and then suddenly experiencing the quality of the first output that they get back, radically exceeding their expectations of what was going to happen. Sort of, you can see this sort of tingle almost start to happen with people. And then as you teach them like some one or two very sort of what would be considered like fundamental basic, maneuvers, like how to write a good prompt or how to develop a strategy by asking questions and sort of almost like mentally sparring with an AI. And suddenly they're creating and battle testing these strategies that they want to in their own little world before they present them to people. It blows their mind. And suddenly these people are super smart. And it feels like you've just given them, the keys to the car, and they know now how to like shift gear, press the accelerator and brake, and they're off. They're flying, like they figure it out. And then the other promise I think that is really important that you're also sharing is when I ask leaders, how much of your time are you spending on true creative problem solving work in your day? The real thorny strategic problems that only you are uniquely human to solve from your experience, right? And versus how much time are you on time sink, sucky tasks that are absolutely necessary, but they just eat up your capacity and your calendar. And like invariably you get the sort of 80-20 answer, right? Where they're sort of, if I'm lucky, 20% is on the strategic work. And for me, again, the promise of these tools is not that you go from 20% of this creative work to 100% of it, but it's that you are winning these minutes and these moments back, and you're pairing your natural human instinct with these incredible data insights to make decisions. And for me, that is sort of the battle we're having here, is we're moving the needle back to where you've got your best people working on the hardest problems with great augmented support and insights and data to pair with their instincts. And they're doing the best work of their life, and they're the happiest people.
Yeah.
Because they're engaged in these like problems that they're not an easy problem, but they love, that's the work they want to do. They don't want to be filling out tickets in a machine saying, yes, today I did these 5 things and blah, 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 blah. That's time suck, like let's get that away from them, and this is for me the product that you're creating at the moment, that you're making the needle go more, that people are more on creative problem solving and less on time suck tasks, but they have everything that the benefit of those time suck tasks being done well provides, with less effort and energy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing we've kind of learned too, is like, with SaaS, like the whole drive is like, hey, let's get everybody to log into our software and count how many people logged in today. And like I understand why we did that, and we had that pricing model through much of history. But what's so refreshing now is we're like, we don't want to make them log in to log stuff into the screen. Like, we want to be more of a dark system where we're just bringing things to them that are important and removing data entry. And that's what's so exciting about the LLMs. Like, they give us so much capability to do a lot of that type of work. And I also love what you said about when I think about magic moments with software, LLMs are way up there, but I haven't had a lot of those moments in the last 10 years. With software, right? Like where you do something and you're just like genuinely surprised. And I love it because it raises the bar for software in general. Because it all starts looking the same after a little while, and like when you use something like that, you're like, oh, the expectations and the bar has been raised dramatically. And what every old piece of software out there is doing right now is they're taking their old piece of software and they're wrapping a little chat thing around it that slides out off the side, and you can type some stuff and try to talk to that 1 or 2 use cases, and that's fine. That's good. Like, it helps over some of the rough edges for some of those old pieces of software. But like when you use something that's actually, everybody says they're AI native, but like when you use something that was built after we knew about LLMs you can feel it because it's wired into those use cases where it's doing stuff that is like that moment you had in your LLM where you're like, oh wow, that's cool. Versus like a slide out for the chat is like all you're doing for me is a cut and you're replacing the cut and paste from what I could paste the thing over to ChatGPT and then paste it back, right? So it's not yeah. So yeah, I love this environment though. It's so fun to go out and compete in that world where execs are expecting more and people are expecting more from the software.
And that's the exciting part for me, right? And again, some of these other tells, because this is kind of a fun little pieces. What are the tells when something is truly AI native? And for me, you've just given a great one away, where it's like the chatbot on the side pattern. I can ask questions of sort of a fixed set of data, and it will understand, serve up an FAQ that's pre-baked or whatever, and send me there. Fine, great, thanks for that. But for me, like the real power of this stuff, and certainly how I've seen leaders really respond, is the ability to sort of ask disconfirming questions that they might have, and sort of say to the system, what are we missing here? What blind spots do we have as a business that I mightn't be aware of? Based on other businesses out there and how they operate, are there things that are missing that you've seen work well in other areas? Like all of this sort of power, if you will, and also to let execs play around, right? One of the things I've learned as well from doing these coaching programs, it's really sucks being an exec, because in some respects, whenever you present information to people, there's sort of this baked in assumption and maybe expectation that it's baked, that the idea is ready, and I'm not like that. I'm someone who learns by sort of, well, what about this? Or what if I need someone to sort of mentally talk it out with and have a Socratic back and forth, or as I say, mentally sort of spar out and make the idea more resilient through dialogue and debate. And these platforms, when they are truly built in the manner you have done with Dotwork, give you an opportunity to do that. You have these hunches that you can say, something feels wrong in sales right now. I don't know what it is. Maybe is it the deals are taking too long to close? What feedback are we getting from customers that is sort of, part of the puzzle I want to figure out? And execs can literally sit down and sort of have that conversation, that dialogue, and play around, in a product like Dotwork, where you just can't do that anywhere else unless they have to go find the data, put it into some LLM, 5 weeks of trying to get things signed off on a data system. Something doesn't work, the quality's crap, it's not consistent, like all the latency that comes into that you don't have confidence in the conversation you're sort of having with these machines, versus a product that's designed to manage messy information, like actually thrives on messy information and is designed to bring coherency to that, and visibility and blind spots and things that you wouldn't even be aware of because you can't map that in your mind. Only machines can, and again, that's why I love this idea of joining the dots, because it's so true. That's what these true systems can do.
Even like just going from unstructured to structured data, like the LLMs are kind of built for some of that, where we can like mine out the nouns and the verbs from a strategy doc and then pull them into the ontology. Like there's so many cool things that we can do that, a person could do it, but like it's just, everything is human in the loop with this problem. There's nothing where it's actually going out and deciding anything. But like just the way the data is staged and mined and brought to the person in context, that is a game changer for moving fast and making more decisive, data-driven decisions. I've been telling on myself the whole podcast. So I'll tell you one more thing where I'd love to tell you, like, I was brilliant and I thought of this up front. I thought of it after the fact, but like we started building this. Okay, we're like, hey, we're going to have an ontology with a knowledge graph and Agentic framework, and we're doing all this stuff. And you're basically building a context engine that's got memory. Right. And so we were doing it to solve the problem of how do we make better decisions in an organizational context. And then, this AI thing gets going, and then, people really start investing in agents and trying to give more autonomy to agents. And it'll be interesting to see where this all goes. But like when I think about if we're ever really going to have people working alongside with agents that have some autonomy, that can go out and help you do things and work alongside people. A lot of the commercials that the big companies are putting out, that's what they show, right? It's like people working at their laptop and then these agents are coming in and helping them do their job. That's all great. But when I think about that really working and how the real world works, there's a bunch of context that people have in their heads about how the organization is structured and who reports to who and all that stuff. When you join a company, you don't just go to one place to get it. You usually go interview a bunch of people to figure out what happened and why did the last leader make these decisions, et cetera. And I was thinking about what we're building. I was like, this is a context memory machine for agents. So if these companies really do in the next few years move forward with having a lot more agents with autonomy running around doing jobs, what we've built is actually this place where they can go and get context. Oh, I understand how the org works, how the budgets work, who reports to who, what they've done in the past, what these people's preferences are for different things. And then the agents can go do their job in a much more effective way because the organizational design and the memory is right there. Like I was saying, we didn't set out to say, hey, that's a great idea, we should do that for agents, but it's just a happy accident where I'm really excited. I'm excited about all the things you mentioned with AI. I'm excited to see where some of this goes because I think the bar has been raised, but I also think the bar is going to continue to be raised with what's happening. And it's really exciting time to be in software for sure.
It is. And, the lesson I think from all of your story is if you don't sort of put yourself out there to go figure these things out, you don't find the nuggets. You cannot learn this stuff in a book. You cannot learn this stuff by sort of reading about it and hearing about it and theoretically sort of getting your head around it. I think it's one of these technologies that you have to get your hands on it, and it's only by using it that you really unlock the levels of understanding what this is about. So again, I know you're describing this as serendipitous opportunities that arise, but they can only arise if you're in the place, like digging in the ground where this stuff is, and then you get the experience, the insight, the ahas to join the dots. And I think that is, for me, certainly been a personal lesson for me about this moment in our sort of cycle of innovation and technologies and so forth. You have to learn this stuff by doing it. And only by doing it do you really get the depth of insight and understanding about where this is going. And I know you're being humble saying it as luck, but what's the famous Gary Player saying? The more I practice, the more luckier I got. I feel like there's something in what you're doing. So for you then, just give us maybe one fun example that you've experienced yourself about how a use case has appeared for you that you're like, wow, this is awesome. Like maybe somebody was using the product, or they had the great experience. Like what have been something that sort of jumped out to you?
Yeah, one of the coolest things about when we took a more platform approach to this one, right? And we had the benefit of 10 years of working on this problem, right? So we had a lot of it's pretty. When I think about building software for enterprise problems, so not like a flywheel type problem where you swipe the card and you're solving a problem and you get really good at doing it. You never have to talk to a human to use it, etc. These enterprise pieces of software are admittedly usually solving a much more complex, nested, wired problem. And so being able to go at it again has been really fun. But like one of the things we learned is like, no matter what you do with the data, there's always going to be some other lens or some other cut of the data that somebody wants, right? We used to call them last mile problems. Like, hey, I want to pull in this other piece of data, or I want to see this with a slightly different angle or lens. And you don't want to, you can easily fall into the trap of building reports that try to do all of that. And you end up with a really, really complex report that's trying to give somebody all the angles, or you build a whole bunch of custom reports to get all the angles. And neither one of those are good solutions. And so when we looked at reporting, we're like, hey, we need to build something that we don't build the report and then try to get people to use the product in a way to fill in the data. We want to go the other way. We want to model the organization and then have the reports reflect the model. And so that was a big aha moment for it. But what it means is it's not engineering writing the reports. So all the reports in the product were either built by product managers or people who are telling us what they want to do with the product, or, you know, designing the report that fits how they run their ritual or their company. And the coolest piece for me was like we had all these really cool visuals being built up in the product, and we were in a stand-up one day, and I pulled up a screen and I started showing some of these things that Kyle and the other people had been building, and engineering had never seen these reports. And they were like, oh, that's cool. And like, it just, in my head, I'm like, this is the first time I've ever been in a company where the engineers never saw the reports. And so that was one of my favorite moments, is just thinking about like, hey, we've got this vision for this better way of solving the problem, coming at it from a completely different direction. And the day it manifested for me that this is really working is when I realized engineering hasn't even seen all this cool stuff that's coming out of their software. So that was awesome. Customers had seen it, they were using it, engineering hadn't seen it. So pretty cool moment. Yeah.
I love it. Look, Steve, you, like I said, you're building something awesome. It's been great to hear you share some of your own stories in this, what is a radically sort of emerging field. Thank you very much for coming and sharing. I'm definitely going to get you to come back on in a couple of months' time, because I'm sure, you know, the world will have changed yet again. And maybe, you know, from digging in the right areas, you've probably got some more great insights to share with us. But, you know, thank you very much. And it's been super having you on the show.
Thank you, Barry. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found this episode useful, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please consider leaving a rating or a review, as it helps others find our podcast. For more episode and details about the show, visit barryoreilly.com, and we'll see you on the next episode.